Our topic is about the organization of the brain. The brain is an amazing three-pound organ that controls all functions of the body, interprets information from the outside world, and embodies the essence of the mind and soul. Intelligence, creativity, emotion, and memory are a few of the many things governed by the brain. Protected within the skull, the brain is composed of the cerebrum, cerebellum, and brainstem. The brain receives information through our five senses: sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing, often many at one time. It assembles the messages in a way that has meaning for us and can store that information in our memory. The brain controls our thoughts, memory, and speech, movement of the arms and legs, and the function of many organs within our body. The central nervous system, or CNS, is composed of the brain and spinal cord.
The peripheral nervous system is composed of spinal nerves that branch from the spinal cord and cranial nerves that branch from the brain. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The major function of the spinal cord is to carry neural messages from the brain to the muscles and sensory messages from the body to the brain. Figure 1.5 shows a cross-section of the brain with some of the most prominent neural structures labeled. Figure 1.5a cross-sectional view of the brain showing some of its major components. The lower parts of the brain are evolutionarily more primitive. The higher portions are well developed only in the higher species. Correspondingly, it appears that the lower portions of the brain are responsible for more basic functions. The medulla controls breathing, swallowing, digestion, and heartbeat. The hypothalamus regulates the expression of basic drives.
The cerebellum plays an important role in motor coordination and voluntary movement. The thalamus serves as a relay station for motor and sensory information from lower areas to the cortex. Although the cerebellum and thalamus serve these basic functions, they also have evolved to play an important role in higher human cognition, as we will discuss later. The cerebral cortex, or neocortex, is the most recently evolved portion of the brain. Although it is quite small and primitive in many mammals, it accounts for a large fraction of the human brain. In humans, the cerebral cortex can be thought of as a rather thin neural sheet with a surface area of around 2,500 cm squared. To fit this neural sheet into the skull, it has to be highly convoluted. A large amount of folding and wrinkling of the cortex is one of the striking physical differences between the human brain and the brains of lower mammals. A bulge of cortex is called gyrus, and a crease passing between gyri is called the sulcus.
The neocortex is divided into left and right hemispheres. One of the interesting curiosity about anatomy is that the right part of the body tends to be connected to the left hemisphere and the left part of the body to the right hemisphere. Thus, the left hemisphere controls motor function and sensation in the right hand. The right ear is most strongly connected to the left hemisphere. The neural receptors in either eye that receive input from the left part of the visual world are connected to the right hemisphere. Brodmann, 1909-1960, identified 52 distinct regions of the human cortex, based on differences in the cell types in various regions. Many of these regions prove to have functional differences as well. The cortical regions are typically organized into four lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal.
Major folds or sulci on the cortex separate the areas. The occipital lobe contains the primary visual areas. The parietal lobe handles some perceptual functions, including spatial processing and representation of the body. It is also involved in the control of attention. The temporal lobe receives input from the occipital area and is involved in object recognition. It also has the primary auditory areas and Wernicke's area, which is involved in language processing. The frontal lobe has two major functions. The back portion of the frontal lobe is involved primarily with motor functions. The front portion, called the prefrontal cortex, is thought to control higher-level processes such as planning. The frontal portion of the brain is disproportionately larger in primates than in most mammals, and among primates, humans are distinguished by having disproportionately larger anterior portions of the prefrontal cortex. At the start of many of the chapters in the text, with an indication of the areas relevant to the topics in those chapters.
In layman's terms, the cerebrum is divided into 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobe. Frontal lobe includes personality, behavior, emotions, judgment, planning, problem solving, speech, speaking, and writing, body movement, intelligence, concentration, and self-awareness. Parietal lobe interprets language, words, sense of touch, pain, temperature, interprets signals from vision, hearing, motor, sensory, and memory, spatial and visual perception, while an occipital lobe interprets vision, color, light, movement. And lastly, temporal lobe understanding language, memory, hearing, sequencing, and organization.
The neocortex is not the only region that plays a significant role in higher level cognition. There are many important circuits that go from the cortex to subcortical structures and back again. A particular significant area for memory proves to be the limbic system, which is at the border between the cortex and the lower structures. The limbic system contains a structure called the hippocampus, located inside the temporal lobes, which appears to be critical to human memory. It is not possible to show the hippocampus in a cross-section like a figure 1.5 between. It is a structure that occurs in the right and left halves of the brain between the surface and the center. Figure 1.7 illustrates the hippocampus and related structures. Damage to the hippocampus and to other nearby structures produces severe amnesia.
The critical connections, input and outputs of the basal ganglia are illustrated. The basal ganglia are involved both in basic motor control and in the control of the complex cognition. These structures receive projections from almost all areas of the cortex and have projections to the frontal cortex. Disorders such as Parkinson's disease and Huntington's disease result from the damage to the basal ganglia. Although people suffering from this disease have dramatic motor control and deficits characterized by tremors and rigidity, they also have difficulties in cognitive tasks. The cerebellum, which has the major role in motor control, also seems to play the role in the higher order cognition. Many cognitive deficits has been observed in patients with damage to the cerebellum. The brain is organized into a number of distinct areas which serve different types of functions, with the cerebral cortex playing the major role in the higher cognitive function.
Connection in the book of David Eagleman, The Brain. In the book, our understanding of reality is less influenced by what's going on outside and more what's going on inside of our head. To get the impression that your senses are windows to the outside world. Your skin, nose, mouth, ears, and eyes all function as centers of sensory information. They find a diverse range of information sources including photons, all compression waves, molecule concentration, pressure, texture, and temperature, and convert them into electrochemical impulses which are brain's standard form of exchange. Everything you can experience, everything sight, sound, smell, rather than being direct experience, is an electrochemical recondition in the dark
The
theater.
limbic system is the center of our emotions, learning, and memory. Included in this system are the cingulate gyri, hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus. If you open up the skull and look at the brain, one of the first things you like to notice is that anatomically, the one brain is really two halves called hemispheres. These two halves are connected by a large bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. Structurally, there are three main divisions of the brain: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Each of these divisions consists of many substructures that are involved in various behaviors and activities. Thank you for watching. We hope you learned something, and we will leave you with a quote by Stephen Richards. Reality is a projection of your thoughts or the things you habitually think about.